Guys, we have a special treat for you. This week is the 41st anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, February 22nd, 1980, the game in which the U.S. Olympic team beat the Russians 4-3 in Lake Placid in a moment that, let's be honest, it's the greatest moment in sports history. I know for our Canadian listeners, the 72 Summit Series, game number 8, that means a lot to you guys. But as far as I think top sports moments go, I would say that the Miracle on Ice, it was more than just a hockey game. So with that, we have a special guest, Mark Lidbetter. He is a journalist up in Canada for one of the papers in Montreal. And he was nice enough to join us and share his experience of actually being in the building, like in the building for this hockey game, for this moment that happened. Because this, like I said, it's not just a hockey game. This was a moment in, at least for American history anyway, that was very crucial. We were a kind of a country that was lost, and this was a moment that really helped change the direction in the early 80s for the United States. So with that, let's get on over to that interview. So this week is kind of a special anniversary for those of us Americans in hockey. To this year's the 41st anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, the game in which the U.S. Olympic team beat the Russians back in Lake Placid on February 22nd, 1980. We happen to be joined today by a gentleman who was actually in the building for the game. Along with Brenden, we are joined by Mr. Mark Lidbetter. Mark, how are you today?
Excellent. Very good. Nice to join you guys. Yeah.
So, Mark, why don't you introduce yourself for everybody, and then we'll get to what we wanted to talk about, the 1980 game.
Well, Mark Lidbetter is the name. Refereeing's been my game for 52 seasons. Started with outdoor hockey back in NDG. Transitioned when we finally got arenas, and I've ref some of the big boys over the years. Did Mario Lemieux, Marc Bergevin, and JJ Daigneault when they were all playing Pee Wee AA on the same team, the Villemard Hurricanes. And then they'd face former Montreal Canadian Sergio Momesso on the NDG Maroons team. I've done the Quebec tournament. I've done countless tournaments. I even remember with the Dollard Novice Hockey Tournament, which had 112 teams at one point. We had Don Koharski come in and referee with Big Mike Civic, Honda Civic, after they did a Nordiques game and they drove back to Montreal with Honda's knees jammed up because I think they were in a small rental car.
I don't think he fit in many vehicles. Let's be honest.
No,
that's a pretty unreal story.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. A lot of, like you guys know, it's a brotherhood out there, and there's a lot of good stories, a lot of good falls that get you some beverages along the way, and a lot of good memories.
Well, so I posted in our Facebook group a picture of the 1980 game. I said 41 years ago on a rink in Lake Placid, and you happened to comment that you were in the building, which that's freaking amazing. So let's talk a little bit about that game. I mean, obviously you're a Canadian, but it still doesn't take away from, the moment. So kind of maybe give a little bit of insight about what was going on at the time and then what it was like being in the building.
Yeah, because as a sports journalist, I was there from Montreal. I hooked a ride with my neighbor. Our family had a place in Peru, New York, and our next door neighbor was news director for one of the local television stations. And the only vehicles that could go into Lake Placid was if they had passes, and hooked a ride into the game that day. And since it wasn't Canada playing, I got to be a fan to watch that. And, I don't think the fire marshal was going to be too happy with the amount of people that were shoehorned into the Olympic arena that day. And just from the start, you could feel the electricity. And when they came out for the warm-up, you'd look at Team USA. They were flying. They were ready to go. They had the good nerves going for them because they wanted to keep the streak going they've been on. and they wanted to avenge what happened at Madison Square Garden when the last time they faced the Russians in an exhibition game before the Olympics.
So you got warm-ups going, the boys are buzzing. I'm sure
Yeah.
the fans, like, what was the atmosphere in the building? Like, everyone
that's
like on edge, like ready to go?
Yeah, they were, and the noise was going. They were chanting USA, USA already. It's one of those things. It was a different time, the political time back then. It was not just a hockey game or a sports
No,
game.
not at all.
It was a political thing because of the Cold War. I mean, we're talking about 1980, that the Summer Olympics, President Carter was looking at boycotting the summer games, and here we are playing the winter games in the United States. And it was a political battle, not just a sports battle.
Yeah, it was much bigger than just the game of hockey in itself. It was, us versus the Russians.
Yeah.
Right.
And also the Russians, they weren't amateurs. This is pre-Dream Team. This is pre-Dream Team, get the pros playing. All the other teams are made up of college kids, amateur hockey players from club teams. The Russians, they're in the army, they're this, they're that, but they were paid to play. And that was always the thing.
That was their job in the military, was to be on the hockey team. So they were, and I can remember looking back and seeing games on NHL Network where they were playing NHL teams and beating them. Yeah. The only NHL team that beat them were the Flyers, because the Flyers literally beat them.
The Broad Street,
they refused to get back on the ice, right?
Yeah.
With the Flyers?
Yeah. They were chickening out on that one. But I mean,
I don't blame them.
Yeah. But, and we went through it in 72 with the Summit Series.
Yeah.
It was a political statement. Hockey is our life. And, it went the 8 games, and Paul Henderson scoring that goal. That is a historical note. It's not a sports note in our country.
Oh, for sure. I've seen some of the games on NHL Network, and I've heard a lot of stories about that 72 Summit Series. So I guess warm-ups are over, boys are on the ice, game starts.
Yeah, and Russian strike first, which has been known to happen. But Buzz Snyder, I was up actually in the nosebleeds opposite Team USA's bench, and I like being up high, because when you're covering a hockey game, you want to see everything happen. And then when Buzz Snyder, 50 feet probably, he fired that and it gets past Tretiak. And Johnson scored his first of the game, ends up in a 2-2 tie going into the middle frame. And what happens when they come out for that second period? Tretiak's not in nets, the best goaltender in the world. Viktor Tikhonov, the coach of the Russians, he puts in Vasily Mishkin to play nets. And I'm going, did he get hurt? Did he have an equipment problem and they're fixing it? But this was his choice.
I know, unbelievable move, something that no one expected.
No. And that was, I think, as we say here, that's the TSN turning point, I think. But it was just amazing. But the thing was, your goalie, Jim Craig, was playing unconscious. He was just in the zone. The body was there. The puck would find his body. He'd make the saves. It's amazing that the Russians only managed that one goal on a power play in the second period to take a 3-2 lead into the break. So that, and the crowd, you could feel it, like the people around me, they felt something. They're saying, hey, this is not the same team that played against the Russians in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. And then because then they got beat, 7-2, I think was the final.
Yeah. Yeah. And they come out for the third period. And this is the thing. I noticed that there was still a lot of jump in the game of Team USA. Herb Brooks, the man for the cardio, the physical excellence, of the players, and the pride that they put into it, because that's the thing. In North America, we play with our heart as well. Canada and US.
Oh, yeah.
The Russians, they're a machine. They're going to backhand pass from point A to point B. They know the player's going to be there. This is going to happen. But when you combined what Team USA had in the terms of heart, skills, and stamina, you could see it building. You knew something was coming. And
And
when
then Johnson scored the tying goal, correct?
yeah, he scored that tying goal, and the building just went nuts. It was deafening. And then with just over 10 minutes left, Mike Eruzione, when he scored, Captain Mike,
Yep.
I thought the building was going to collapse from the decibel level. It was just phenomenal what happened,
Yep.
And just from then you could hear the crowd just like wave after wave of cheering and yelling through that final 10 minutes. I'm surprised, arena throat. I'm surprised.
Yep.
I'm surprised nobody had arena no voice whatsoever by the end of it. But they just kept chanting, and you could see the Russians started to show cracks in the armor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they never go into panic mode, but they were, because physically they were getting hit. They were getting outskated by the Americans. And as time counted down and you got towards the last minute, the kids were still as fresh as if it was the first shift of the game.
Yep.
And
that goes into, what, Herb Brooks with their physical conditioning.
Yeah.
And then too, you got to think, for the Russians, the crowd's got to be playing a part in this. With how loud they are, how rowdy, how behind Team USA they were. The adrenaline for Team USA must have been nonstop.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, in football when they start yelling in the stands to confuse the opposing quarterback.
Yep.
Well, Tikhonov is calling out signals. He's calling out line changes, and things aren't happening. The players, they can't really communicate with what's going on. And the crowd, just as we hit that last minute, you could see they were taking such low percentage shots, just trying to get the puck into the zone, trying to get that tying goal, but they couldn't even get a good shot from in close. The Americans were all over them. It was amazing to watch.
And then, that last 5 seconds, the crowd counting down the game.
Yeah.
And then obviously on the feed later on, we get the Al Michaels, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. Call. Yeah. And obviously the moment wasn't live on television in the US.
No.
But it was something that, like, the party in the building, I know people were jumping on the ice, and
they went crazy. It was USA nonstop. They stayed for a longest time. They finally started to move out into the little village of Lake Placid.
Yep.
And the best way I could describe it, it'd be like Mardi Gras, the Quebec City Carnival, and the 4th of July all rolled up into one. I mean,
my goodness.
They just took over the streets.
I'm getting goosebumps just sitting here listening to you tell this story. This is unreal.
And it wasn't, just the Americans at that point, because out in the village you had, fans from around the world. You had players from some of the other teams and that knew the game was going, that couldn't get in. And they just couldn't believe it when they heard that Team USA had beaten the Russians like that. Because I've always liked Al Michaels' analogy, where he once said that this was like a Canadian university football team beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were the powerhouse back when he said that. But that's exactly, I love that analogy of what it was like,
That's absolutely amazing. Like, having gotten to be there, it was this year's 41 years since it happened. And it's still one of those moments, like, for me, I'm only 34, but every year on February 22nd, I always post, X amount of years ago today in Lake Placid, because it's just one of those things where not only is it a sports moment, but it truly, I feel like in the history of the United States, especially then in the 80s, we were all very down, like the country was very down on itself.
Exactly.
And that moment kind of helped turn the tide and getting the U.S. back to, being what it was in the, then on in the 80s, after, when Reagan took over and all of that.
Well, I know, because there were celebrations. I remember seeing the news feeds, throughout the country, places where they wouldn't know what a puck looked like. And, they're out in the streets and honking the horns of the car and going USA, USA.
Yep.
And I do regret that ABC did not broadcast that game live.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, that was disrespect. I mean, it's one of those things. I know some of my buddies in the States did watch it, you know, that were on border towns or that, you know, like
Yeah.
close enough where they could pull in a Montreal station or Toronto or wherever.
Oh, so the game was live on TV in Canada.
Oh yeah, CBC Sports carried it live.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And obviously this is pre-internet, pre-social media, pre-instant communication for anything.
That's right.
So this was going on, and most of the U.S. had no idea until hours later that they'd won the game.
Yep. They kept it a secret. They promised, like they said, not to say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they packaged the game. They carved it down so it would fit into a certain time frame when they broadcast it that night.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it was meant to fit into a certain time frame, and you know, they shaved some time here and there. You know, like when you do a recap of a game type thing, mm-hmm. and cut where they could, and away they went.
And then,
but I'd rather have been there than.
Oh. I was at Game 7 of the Cup Finals in 2004 when the Lightning won, when we won our first Cup here, and that was awesome. But I couldn't imagine, like, just that's on a whole different level.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of my final question about it is, obviously we've all seen the movie Disney Made Miracle. How do you think that movie captured what happened then?
I would say they stayed pretty true to form in that, because, you know, Herb Brooks, that's what he went through.
Yep.
Players, that's what they went through. Because you would hear these stories. I'm an old fart. I would be, you know, reading the newspaper and
yep.
Going through how the team was put together, and the fact that when they lost that game against the Russians in Madison Square Garden, USA Hockey wasn't too pleased with that. And mm-hmm. Herb Brooks did, when they won, before he went back out to the team, he did go into the hallway to the dressing room, and he did break down that time and cried.
Yep.
You know, from what had been accomplished. So it's an excellent movie. It's
it definitely is. Brenden, what do you have?
Honestly, I'm just in absolute awe. I mean, like I've watched A Miracle, you know, millions of times probably at this point, and just to be able to hear it from somebody that was there is just insane.
I hope I did it justice.
if
you
not
definitely
more.
did. That's for sure. Like, because it's one of those things, that place held what, 5,000-6,000 people, and there might have been double capacity.
Yeah, 8,600 they said, and I think there was more than that. It was probably closer to 10 squeezed in.
Okay, and I've actually had the pleasure of getting to go there once myself.
Yeah,
I skated there for USA Hockey's instructor camp.
I got to play there before they did the renovations for the second one. Our teams here used to go to the big multi-level hockey tournament every year.
The Can-Am or whatever they do there.
Yeah. So Big Lake Placid.
So and anyone that's been there, you know, you go in, all the locker rooms, like they have which locker room was who's marked. They've kept it, you know, true to what it was as far as the building. Obviously there have been upgrades of the video board, this, that, and the other. But it's one of those places you walk in and you can, like, just walking into the building, you can feel, you know, the history. If only those walls could talk, you know.
Yeah, but there might be some 10-minute misconducts given out for a couple.
Well, I can only imagine there. And to, like, having gotten to be in the building, you're, you know, one of maybe 10 or 12,000 people that actually got to witness it live in person.
Yeah.
To be able to talk to you today, you know, here on this 41st anniversary of the moment is just awesome. And I greatly appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy as a sports reporter. You had some stuff go down today that we're going to get into on the podcast.
Yeah.
But man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Maybe in the future, we'll definitely have you on just to talk about, you know, you said you've been doing this for a very long time. So hearing some stories from you would be amazing.
I appreciate it, and it's nice to get to speak to you guys. We're all members of the Brotherhood of the Blind, and
love it.
And it's one of my highlights having been at that game.
Were you at the game against the Finns, or was it the Czechs that they had to play?
No, the Finns was the last game that they had to play. But
That's right.
Basically, the format that it ran, they had won the gold medal already in that respect.
Yeah, because they didn't do a gold medal game. It was just whoever had the best record at round robin, right?
Yeah. And no, I didn't go to the Finnish game. I finished with the Russian game.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, how can you top that, right? And wasn't it Mike Eruzione? He didn't play pro. I think that was it for him. He called it a career after that.
Yeah, you might as well go out. What did they say on Seinfeld? Go out on a high note.
Yeah, right. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. Brenden, you have any closing thoughts for Mark?
No, I mean, we are definitely going to have you on again because you probably have a million amazing stories, but thank you for coming on. It was awesome. I mean, I'm in awe.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure, guys. Yeah, we were talking before we started up there, and there's a few of the boys, and there's a few stories,
and a few sodas along the way as well, I'm sure.
Oh yes, a pop here and there. If you go down, you must pay the round.
Exactly, that's the dang truth. Well, Mark, again, thank you so much, and hey, everybody, thanks for listening to this interview. Guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to the interview with Mark talking about the 1980 Miracle on Ice. This is a special kind of bonus episode. We're putting it on YouTube, obviously, because you're watching it here. So thanks for checking out this clip. We definitely plan on having Mark on again in the future. He's got a lot of stories to tell from the Pee Wee
Quebec Pee Wee tournament
to reffing some some pros when they were Pee-wees, to having Don Koharski referee a youth game with Mike Civic that Jamie was playing in. I can't wait to give Jamie a hard time about that. Anyway, with that, again, I hope you enjoyed this quick little bonus episode on what is the 41st anniversary of the Miracle on Ice.